The intergalactic boarding house was home to over 50 species from across the cosmos, but only one human, Jake, a mechanic from Earth who had taken up residence in Unit 342, he had barely started adjusting to life among his alien neighbors, when his landlady Vress, an 8-foot-tall insectoid with razor-sharp mandibles and 6 twitching limbs, barged into his room without warning, her exoskeleton clicking loudly, in irritation, her antennae whipping back and forth as her huge compound eyes scanned his quarters before locking onto something that made her entire body go rigid. There was a long moment of silence, and then the translator unit embedded in her thorax screeched loudly in a panicked robotic voice, "Human, why is there a tiny Shai-Hulud between your legs?" Jake froze, standing there in nothing but a loose pair of shorts, one sock still in his hand. He had been in the middle of getting dressed when Vress stormed in without knocking. Now she stood at the threshold of his small room, her limbs curling inward, her stance shifting into one of defensive aggression, like she was ready to pounce, or worse, to attack. Jake blinked, trying to process her words, before following her horrified gaze. He sighed loudly. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me, not this again," he muttered, running a hand through his already messy hair. Vress recoiled, as if he had just confessed to carrying a live explosive. Her mandibles clacked rapidly, her wings fluttering in agitation. "Do you even realize what you have done?" she shrieked, her voice rising with genuine terror. "That thing is a burrowing horror. A world eater. The last time my species encountered one, it devoured entire colonies before we could stop it. And now you stand here unfazed, as if you have not brought doom upon us all," Jake groaned, rubbing his temples. "Look, Vress, I swear to you, this is not a Shai-Hulud. It is not a burrowing horror, or a world eater, or anything dangerous at all. It is just part of human anatomy, completely normal, completely harmless, nothing to freak out about." But Vress did not look convinced. In fact, she took another step back, her segmented fingers curling into trembling fists. "Do not lie to me, human. Do not insult my intelligence. I have seen the records, the images, the reports from those who survived contact with those creatures, and you dare stand there and tell me that you are not harboring a death spawn." Her voice had risen to a pitch that could probably shatter glass, and Jake could already hear the commotion in the hallways outside, curious tenants whispering in hushed tones, wondering what new disaster was unfolding within the human's room. He exhaled, slowly counting to 3 in his head, before holding up his hands in surrender. All right, let's just take a step back and breathe for a second, okay? I promise you, whatever you think you saw, it is not what you think it is. I am not smuggling a predator into the building." Vress did not lower her guard, her antennae twitching erratically. "I do not believe you humans are strange, unpredictable creatures. For all I know, you could be an incubator carrying a dormant threat, waiting for the right moment to unleash it upon us all," she accused, her gaze narrowing in deep suspicion. Jake let out a strangled laugh. "Oh, come on, do you really think my species would last this long if we had miniature planet-eating monsters attached to us? Do you think we just go about our daily lives with little death worms ready to burrow into the nearest available surface?" He shook his head. "Absolutely not, that would be insane." But Vress was having none of it. Her eyes glowed with an eerie intensity, her claws clicking against each other in a sharp rhythm. "Then explain it, human. Explain why you have a creature resembling a flesh burrower between your legs, and why it has not yet attempted to consume you whole." Jake sighed deeply, running both hands down his face. "Great, just great first week in this place." And he was already having the most awkward conversation of his life with a giant alien insect. How was he supposed to explain this in a way that would make sense to a species that had never encountered human anatomy before? His mind raced, trying to find the right words to make her understand without making the situation even weirder. But before he could respond, the door behind Vress suddenly burst open, and another resident, Gorvax, a hulking reptilian with 4 muscular arms and a deep booming voice, rushed in, holding a stun baton, his wide yellow eyes filled with alarm. "I heard the distress alert. What is happening? Is the human in danger? Did the death worm hatch?" Gorvax demanded, scanning the room as if expecting to find a writhing nightmare waiting to pounce. Jake closed his eyes and inhaled deeply before exhaling slowly. "No, Gorvax, nothing hatched. There is no death worm. It is just a massive misunderstanding." Vress snapped her gaze back to Jake, her expression unreadable, her exoskeleton. Still trembling, "You are certain?" she asked, her voice sharp and wary. Jake gave her the most exhausted look he could muster. 100% certain. "I promise you nothing in this room is going to start eating people." There was a long silence as Vress and Gorvax exchanged glances, the tension so thick it could have been cut with a blade. Finally Vress let out a long exhale, her wings settling against her back. "Fine," she muttered, "but I do not trust this, not yet." Jake dropped his head back with another loud groan. This was going to be a very, very long day. Jake stood there, arms crossed over his bare chest as Vress continued to stare at him, her huge compound eyes reflecting his image like he was some kind of horrifying anomaly. He sighed, running a hand through his messy brown hair before glancing at Gorvax, who was still gripping his stunned baton tightly. "Look," Jake said slowly, carefully, as if speaking to a room full of frightened children, "I promise you, there is no death worm, there is no flesh burrower, there is nothing in this room that is going to eat you or anyone else for that matter. Can we please just take a deep breath and calm down before this situation gets even more out of hand?" Vress did not move. She remained perfectly still, her mandibles twitching slightly as she processed his words. Her antennae flicked toward Gorvax, who let out a low, rumbling growl. "I have seen the records of what a Shai-Hulud can do," Gorvax muttered, his yellow eyes narrowing. "Entire outposts swallowed by the sound, entire ecosystems erased in a matter of days. The idea that you humans would carry one between your legs and act like it is no big deal is beyond comprehension." Jake clenched his jaw, fighting the urge to scream. "Okay, first of all, it is not a Shai-Hulud," he said, forcing himself to stay patient. "And second of all, why does your species even know about those things? I thought they were just some old sci-fi myth." Vress shuddered, as if the mere mention of the name sent chills down her exoskeletal spine. "They are real human. They exist in the deep desert worlds of Ulcath 9 and beyond. My people barely survived our encounters with them. Only through fire and sacrifice did we manage to drive them away." Her voice took on a haunted tone as she continued, "You do not understand what they are capable of. They do not simply eat their prey, they consume, they assimilate, they multiply like a virus of hunger that never ends." Jake groaned again, pinching the bridge of his nose. Okay, I get it, you are all very traumatized by these things, but I swear on everything I own that what you think you saw is not one of them." Vress did not look convinced. Her long clawed fingers curled and uncurled in agitation. "Explain," she demanded, voice sharp as steel. "Explain to me what I saw. If it is not a Shai-Hulud, then what is it? Because to me, and to every other species in this building, it looks like a juvenile burrower." Jake let out a slow breath. This was officially the most uncomfortable conversation he had ever been forced into, and considering he once had to explain earth plumbing to a species that absorbed water through their skin, but was saying something. "Okay, listen," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Humans have a lot of weird biological features compared to other species. This just happens to be one of them. It is a part of our anatomy. It is normal for us, completely natural, nothing dangerous, just a function of how we evolved. I swear on my life, it will not grow, it will not burrow, and it will not start devouring the building from the inside." Vress continued to stare at him, her exoskeleton still bristling slightly. "You expect me to simply believe that this horror is a natural part of your species?" she asked, slowly, sounding both doubtful and mildly disgusted. "I do not see how this is possible. What evolutionary advantage would such a thing provide?" Jake opened his mouth, then immediately closed it, realizing that explaining human reproductive biology to an alien who thought he was hiding a monster would probably only make things worse. Instead, he rubbed his temples before exhaling heavily. "You know what? I do not have time to give you a full biology lecture. Just trust me when I say that it is not a threat to you or anyone else." Gorvax shifted uncomfortably, still gripping his stun baton. He clearly was not convinced. Vress clicked her mandibles, tapping one claw against the floor before finally speaking. "Then we will scan you," she declared, voice final and resolute. "We will run a full biological diagnostic to ensure that you are not unknowingly incubating a predator. If your claims are true, you have nothing to fear. If you are lying, then you will be removed from this station immediately." Jake groaned loudly, flopping back onto his bed, throwing an arm over his face. Unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. I leave Earth for 1 month, and this is what my life becomes. Fine, whatever, let's go to the med bay and clear this up, because I'm not spending the rest of my lease with everyone thinking I am some kind of walking biohazard. Vress nodded sharply, stepping aside as Gorvax motioned for Jake to follow him through the hallways. The boarding house was already buzzing with whispers as news of the alleged Shai-Hulud infestation spread like wildfire. Jake kept his head down, grumbling under his breath as alien eyes followed his every movement. Some were filled with curiosity, others with outright horror. He overheard a snake-like being mutter something about quarantining the entire building, while another resident, a gelatinous blob creature, oozed away nervously. As they approached the med bay, Jake sighed again, shaking his head at the sheer absurdity of his life. This was going to be one hell of a story to tell the next human who moved in. Jake walked down the hallway, flanked by Vress and Gorvax the reptilian, still gripping his stun baton tightly, as if expecting the so-called tiny Shai-Hulud to suddenly lash out and consume them all whole. The tension in the boarding house was thick with anxiety. Doors were cracked open as various alien tenants peered out, some whispering to each other in hushed voices, others quickly retracting back into their rooms as if merely looking at Jake might be enough to trigger a catastrophic event. "This is ridiculous," Jake muttered under his breath, keeping his gaze fixed forward, ignoring the dozens of wary eyes watching his every move. "I am not carrying a death worm. I am not an incubator. I am just a guy trying to live my life without getting thrown out of yet another building because aliens keep misunderstanding human anatomy." Silence stretched between them for several moments before Vress finally spoke, her mandibles clicking as she addressed him. "If this is truly a misunderstanding, then you should be grateful for this opportunity to prove your innocence," she said, her voice cool and even, but still carrying an edge of suspicion. "Oh yeah," thrilled Jake muttered dryly, "absolutely ecstatic to have my body scanned and analyzed, just so everyone here can stop thinking I'm a walking doomsday event." They finally reached the med bay, a sterile white room lined with diagnostic pods and floating drones that beeped softly as they hovered through the air. An automated voice greeted them with a cheerful chime. "Welcome to the Station Medical Diagnostics Unit. Please state the nature of your visit." Vress stepped forward, glancing at Jake, before turning back to the med bay interface. "We need a full biological scan on this human," she said, speaking with the authority of someone who fully expected her request to be treated as a matter of utmost urgency. "Possible contamination risk. Potential infestation of Class 5 apex predator." Jake groaned, slapping a hand over his face. "For the last time, there is no infestation, no contamination, and no Class 5 apex predator. But sure, let's do this. Let's give me the most invasive scan possible, just to prove I am not a ticking time bomb." The med bay drone whirred for a moment, then beeped. "Understood. Please step into the diagnostic pod for a full-body scan. Do not move during analysis." Jake sighed dramatically, driving a hand down his face, before stepping inside the sleek cylindrical chamber. The glass door slid shut with a soft hiss, and a blue light flickered to life, scanning his entire body from head to toe. For the next 30 seconds, there was only the low hum of the machine as it worked. Vress stood rigidly outside, watching with sharp, unblinking eyes, while Gorvax shifted uncomfortably, his grip on the stun baton tightening with every passing moment. Jake rolled his eyes internally, wondering how in the universe he ended up in a situation like this. Finally, the machine let out a confirming beep, scanning complete results, processing biological anomaly detected. Jake's stomach dropped. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me." Vress tensed, her exoskeleton rattling in alarm. "Anomaly detected? What anomaly? Explain immediately," she demanded, her voice sharp and urgent. The automated voice responded in its usual pleasant tone. "Detected anomaly is classified under standard human physiology, non-threatening, no foreign organisms detected, no parasitic life forms detected, no internal infestations detected." Jake threw his arms up in exasperation. "See, I told you, no death worms, no flesh burrowers, no universe-ending parasites, just normal human biology, for crying out loud. Can we please put this ridiculous accusation to rest now?" Vress hesitated, staring at the scanner results, as if waiting for them to change, as if expecting some hidden danger to reveal itself. When nothing happened, she slowly straightened her posture, clicking her mandibles. "Softly, very well, human," she said begrudgingly. "It appears your claims were truthful." Jake let out a dramatic sigh of relief. "Oh, thank God, maybe now I can finally go back to living my life without being treated like a biological hazard." He stepped out of the scanners, stretching his arms above his head, then turned to Vress with a smirk. "So what now? Do I get an official apology? Or is that too much to ask?" Vress bristled at the suggestion, her antennae flicking in irritation. "I will not apologize for taking necessary precautions," she said stiffly. "Your species is new to this station, and given the sheer unpredictability of human biology, it is only natural that such precautions were required." Gorvax, however, seemed less hostile, his grip on the stun baton loosening slightly. "Well, Jake, looks like you were telling the truth. After all," he said with a small nod. "Maybe we overreacted a little." "A little," Jake repeated incredulously. "You dragged me down here for a full-body scan because my anatomy gave Vress a panic attack over a childhood horror story. I think overreaction is an understatement." Gorvax shrugged. "Fair enough." Vress crossed her arms, clicking her mandibles once more before finally turning away. "Very well, human, you are free to go. But this incident will not be forgotten." Jake rolled his eyes. "Oh, ensure it won't, because why would anything in my life ever be normal at this point? Whatever, and going back to my room. I need a nap after this disaster." As he walked back down the hall, he could still feel the lingering stares of his fellow tenants, but this time they were mixed with curiosity rather than fear. Jake sighed, shaking his head. Life in an alien boarding house was proving to be far stranger than he had ever imagined. Jake walked back toward his room, rubbing his temples as he tried to process the sheer absurdity of what had just happened. Vress and Gorvax followed a few steps behind him, their movements still stiff with tension, as if they had not entirely accepted the results of the scan. He could hear whispers from the other tenants, some murmuring in confusion, others still wary despite the confirmation that he was not harboring an intergalactic nightmare. "Unbelievable," Jake muttered under his breath. "First I move in, then I get accused of smuggling a world eater. Now I have to live with the fact that half the station still thinks I am some kind of biological anomaly." As he approached his door, he could hear faint chittering from the vents above, a sure sign that the smaller residents of the boarding house, the ones who lived in the maintenance shafts and air ducts, had also caught wind of the situation. "Great, now even the vent crawlers are in on it," he grumbled, pushing the door open and stepping inside. Vress clicked her mandibles behind him, her antennae twitching before she crossed her arms. "Human, this may be resolved, but I will not forget what has transpired today. Your species is unpredictable, your biology is unpredictable. I do not like unpredictability." "Yeah, well, join the club," Jake shot back over his shoulder, flopping onto his bed and rubbing his eyes. "Trust me, lady, I never expected to have a conversation about this particular subject with my landlord, let alone an 8-foot-tall space bug." Vress bristled at the word bug, but did not argue. Instead, she lingered in the doorway, staring at him with those large, unblinking compound eyes, before finally speaking. "Perhaps it would be wise for you to submit a complete biological profile to the station database. If another human ever arrives, it would prevent future incidents." Jake groaned, pulling a pillow over his face. "Yeah, sure, whatever. I will add that to my growing list of things I never thought I would have to do." Vress let out a sharp click of finality before turning and stalking away down the hall. Gorvax hesitated for a moment, then gave Jake a small nod. "Well, Jake, at least you did not get evicted today. See you around." With that, he followed Vress, leaving Jake alone at last. He let out a long exhale, staring up at the ceiling before shaking his head. "What a day," he muttered, rolling onto his side and closing his eyes, hoping for a few minutes of peace. He got exactly 5 minutes before there was another knock at his door. Jake groaned loudly, throwing an arm over his face. "For the love of come on, what now?" He pushed himself up, walking over and yanking the door open, only to find himself face to face with a small group of alien tenants, most of whom he had never even spoken to before. A squat amphibious being with translucent skin gurgled curiously. "So human, the scan confirmed that your anatomy is not dangerous. But what exactly is it then?" Jake stared at them for a long moment, then slowly reached for the door handle. "I'm not having this conversation," he said flatly. Before he could shut the door, another voice piped up, a long-limbed avian with shimmering purple feathers, tilted its head. "Are all humans like this? Do all of your kind carry such anomalies?" Jake clenched his jaw, his patience wearing dangerously thin. "Okay, listen very carefully," he said, his voice low and tired. "My anatomy is not an anomaly. It is normal for humans. It is not a parasite. It is not a burrower. It is just a part of how my species evolved. That is all you need to know now. Please, for the love of all that is good and holy, let me have some peace." The amphibian gurgled again, but before it could speak, Jake slammed the door shut, locked it, and pressed his forehead against the cool metal, sighing deeply. He could still hear them talking outside, muttering, speculating, whispering about the strange biological oddities of the human species. Fantastic, just fantastic. He had survived the interrogation, he had survived the scan, but now he was a walking curiosity, a subject of endless fascination for his alien neighbors. Shaking his head, Jake flopped back onto his bed, determined to ignore the outside world for the next few hours. He closed his eyes once again, finally ready to rest. And then his communicator pinged. He cracked one eye open, staring at the glowing screen. A message from the station administration. "Notice all incoming human residents must now submit a full biological disclosure form before approval. Failure to comply may result in housing application rejection." Jake groaned loudly, rolling over and shoving his face into his pillow. This was never going to end. Jake lay face down on his bed, arms sprawled out, staring blankly at his communicator screen. The message from station administration, glowing like a personal insult to his existence. He exhaled sharply, rubbing his hands down his face. "Unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. I leave Earth for 1 month and suddenly I am a walking biological hazard." He threw the communicator onto his nightstand, rolling onto his back and staring at the ceiling. The soft hum of the boarding house ventilation system droned in the background, punctuated by the occasional scuttling of something in the ducts above. Whatever, at least the worst of it, was over. Right, wrong. A rapid series of knocks echoed against his door. Jake groaned loudly, debating whether to ignore it. But then the knocking turned into insistent pounding. "Jake, human, open this door." Immediately came the familiar clicking voice of Vress. Jake groaned again, louder this time, dragging himself off the bed and stomping over to the door. Fine, keep your exoskeleton on," he grumbled as he yanked the door open. "What now?" Vress stood there, looking more agitated than before, her antennae twitching rapidly, her large compound eyes reflecting his exhausted face. Her arms were crossed, her sharp claws tapping against her chitinous forearm. Behind her stood Gorvak's arms, folded, expression unreadable. But there was tension in his massive frame that set Jake's nerves on edge. What he asked flatly, Vress did not waste time with pleasantries. "Another report was submitted to station administration regarding you," she said, voice tight. "Another resident has claimed that you may still be a risk and are merely hiding your true nature. The biological scan was deemed inconclusive due to human physiology being largely unstudied by the wider galactic community." Jake stared at her, mouth slightly open. "Are you serious?" "Deadly serious," Vress replied. "You are to be subject to further investigation. Failure to comply may result in your removal from the boarding house." Jake dragged a hand down his face, letting out a slow, exhausted sigh. "I am seriously starting to regret moving here," he muttered before shaking his head. "Okay, fine. Whatever. What does this investigation involve?" Vress straightened, as if she had been waiting for that question. "You'll undergo a biological review by an expert in xenophysiology. A specialist has been contacted and will arrive within the next cycle. Until then, you are to remain under observation." Jake blinked. "Under observation, as in you are putting me under house arrest?" "If you wish to call it that," Vress said matter-of-factly, "it is merely a precaution until the expert arrives." Jake let out a humorless laugh. "Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. So now what, I just sit here while the entire station gossips about the weird human with the maybe monster attached to him?" Gorvax shifted slightly, looking uncomfortable before finally speaking. "It is not personal, Jake, but you have to understand most species in this station have never encountered humans before, and the ones that have, well, they have heard stories. Your kind is considered highly unpredictable." Jake scoffed, unpredictable. Give me a break, look around you. This station has residents that can spit acid, others that can regrow limbs overnight, and at least one guy who literally turns into gas when he is upset. But I'm the one getting put under observation because my species happens to be a little different. Vress clicked her mandibles once again. It is not merely that your species is different, it is that your species is unknown. Unknown variables are dangerous. You should know this, Jake. Jake let out another sigh, rubbing his temples. Whatever, fine, let's just get this over with. When is this expert supposed to arrive? Within the next 24 standard hours, Vress replied. Until then you will remain in your quarters under surveillance. Jake threw up his hands. Great love, that amazing, living the dream over here. He turned and walked back into his room, muttering under his breath before flopping onto his bed again. Vress and Gorvax lingered outside the doorway for a moment before Vress finally spoke. You should know, human, that the specialist assigned to your case is one of the most well-respected xenobiologists in the sector. Their assessment will determine your status on this station permanently. Jake did not even bother sitting up. Yeah, great. Tell them to bring a microscope and a sense of humor. They are going to need both. Vress let out a final sharp click before turning on her heel and leaving. Gorvax shot Jake a look that was almost sympathetic before following her, leaving Jake alone once again. He sighed heavily, staring up at the ceiling before pulling a pillow over his face. This was never going to end, was it? Jake lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had come to this station looking for a fresh start, a quiet place to live and work, and maybe even make some friends instead. He was now the subject of what felt like a full-scale inquisition, all because his anatomy did not fit neatly into the galaxy's understanding of normal. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, then sat up, stretching his arms over his head. Okay, whatever they want to bring in a xenobiologist, fine. Let them do their little study, then maybe they will finally leave me alone, he muted to himself. He grazed his communicator, opening the station network to see if there were any updates about this so-called expert. Apparently, there were some big deal scientists, someone with a reputation for being extremely thorough in their studies. Fantastic. Just what I need, he thought. Someone even more obsessed with my biology than the rest of the station already is. As he scrolled through messages and news feeds, he noticed something else. His name was starting to spread, not just in the boarding house, but across the station network. Forums were lighting up with speculation about the humans. Some people were convinced he was telling the truth, but others were sure there was more to the story. The theories ranged from mildly ridiculous to outright insane. One post claimed that humans were actually an invasive species carrying hidden parasites. Another suggested that his so-called anomaly was actually a weapon designed for infiltration and biological warfare. Jake groaned, shooting off his communicator and flopping back onto the bed. Fantastic, just fantastic. At this rate, even if I pass this stupid test, half the station will still think I am some kind of bioengineered horror show. A sudden knock on his door made him jolt upright. He sighed, rubbing his eyes before standing up and opening it, expecting Vress or Gorvax. Instead, he found himself face to face with a tall, thin alien covered in deep blue scales. Their 4 golden eyes blinked in perfect synchronization as they studied him, hands clasped behind their back. They wore a crisp white uniform with the insignia of the Galactic Scientific Consortium. Good evening, human, the alien said, voice smooth and calm. My name is Dr. Serval. I have been assigned to conduct your biological evaluation. May I come in? Jake exhaled, slowly resisting the urge to slam the door in Serval's face. Yeah, sure, whatever, let's get this over with. He stepped aside, allowing the scientist to enter. Serval moved with precise, calculated movements, scanning the room briefly before turning their full attention back to Jake. I understand you are frustrated by this situation, Serval said, but you must also understand the importance of our work. Humans are a new species to this station. Your biology is largely undocumented, and certain features have raised concerns among the residents. Jake crossed his arms. Yeah, no kidding, people are acting like I am hiding a doomsday device between my legs, and all because of one big misunderstanding. Serval tilted their heads slightly. Fascinating misunderstandings often reveal more about the species involved than direct study alone. Tell me, human, are you willing to cooperate fully with this examination? Jake sighed. Yeah, sure, whatever you need me to do. just as long as we can finally put this nonsense to rest." Serval nodded. "Good. Please sit. I will begin with a preliminary scan, then conduct a detailed analysis to compare your biological structure with known human records." Jake sat down, rolling his eyes as Serval activated a scanning device. A soft blue light swept over him, collecting data. Serval watched the results with an expression of deep concentration. "I'm intriguing. Your physiology matches known human data, but there are minor variances in muscular density and metabolic function." Jake frowned. "Okay, is that bad?" "Not necessarily," Serval said. "Only variation is common in all species, but given the circumstances I will need to conduct further analysis to confirm that there are no unexpected anomalies." Jake groaned. "Great, more tests." "Love that for me." Serval ignored his sarcasm and continued working, occasionally making notes on a small datapad. After several minutes they finally spoke again. "I must say, human, your species is quite remarkable. In many ways your adaptability, your resilience, your capacity for rapid environmental adjustment, all of these traits are fascinating, but the specific biological feature that caused this entire situation remains the most perplexing." Jake rubbed his face. Yeah, welcome to the nightmare that is my life on this station. So what now? Am I free to go? Or do you need to dissect me before clearing me?" Serval actually smiled, a rare expression among their species. "Do not worry, human, I have no intention of harming you, but I will need to prepare a full report. Until then you are still under observation, but I believe we are close to resolving this matter." Jake groaned. "Fantastic. I cannot wait to see what wild conclusions everyone jumps to next." Jake sat there, arms crossed, watching as Dr. Serval continued their meticulous scanning, the blue light of their device sweeping over his body in slow, calculated movements. He had been through medical exams before standard health checkups back on Earth, but this felt like something else entirely, like he was some kind of rare specimen being catalogued in a lab. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "So Doc, be honest with me, I actually some kind of terrifying biological anomaly? Or is everyone here just overreacting?" Serval did not answer right away. Their golden eyes remained fixed on the data streaming across their device. After a moment, they tilted their head. "Fascinating." Jake tensed a little. That word was never good in situations like this. "What is fascinating?" Serval tapped a few commands on their datapad before looking up. "Human physiology is well documented within certain scientific communities, but it is far from common knowledge in wider galactic circles. Your species is still considered relatively unknown, and as such many of your traits remain unverified in a formal sense." Jake rolled his eyes. Yeah, I get it. Humans are the new kids on the block, still waiting for the part where you tell me I am not secretly a galactic horror waiting to happen." Serval blinked, their golden eyes glimmering with something Jake could only describe as genuine curiosity. "I would not go so far as to call you a horror, but I can understand why your presence has caused a stir." Jake groaned, throwing his hands up. "Great, just great. So what now? You writing up some big fancy report, telling everyone I am safe, or am I about to get quarantined for life?" Serval considered this carefully. "Your physiology is unique, but not inherently dangerous. I will submit my findings to station administration, and I suspect the restrictions on you will be lifted. However, I must ask one final question before concluding my report." Jake sighed. "Yeah, sure, whatever, let's hear it." Serval leaned forward slightly, their voice calm but intense. "Are there any other undiscovered aspects of human biology that might cause a similar misunderstanding in the future? Anything at all that might be considered unusual by galactic standards?" Jake hesitated, staring at Serval for a long moment before finally running a hand through his hair. "You mean, aside from the fact that humans can eat things that would poison half the galaxy, can survive in extreme temperatures, can adapt to lower oxygen levels faster than most species, and have a ridiculously high pain tolerance compared to a lot of known aliens?" Serval's eyes blinked all four at once, their expression unreadable. "Fascinating. Indeed, your species truly is remarkable." Jake sighed. "Yeah, well, tell that to everyone who thinks I am a ticking time bomb. Look, Doc, I am just a regular guy. I am not some kind of special human mutation or a bioengineered weapon. I am just built the way my species is built, And honestly, I would really love it if people could stop freaking out about that. And Serval nodded, tapping a few more notes into their datapad. Very well. I believe I have everything I need. I will submit my findings to the proper authorities and inform Vress that you are no longer under suspicion. Jake let out a dramatic exhale. Finally, some good news. So does this mean people are going to stop knocking on my door every 5 minutes, asking me invasive questions about my anatomy? Serval tilted the head. That may take some time. Curiosity is difficult to suppress after all. Jake groaned. Great, just great. Serval stood up, their movements precise and deliberate. This has been an enlightening experience, human. I look forward to seeing how your species integrates further into galactic society. Jake waved a hand. Yeah, glad I could provide some free science. Now, if you do not mind, I'm going to try and salvage what little remains of my peace and quiet. Serval gave a small nod before turning and exiting the room, leaving Jake alone once more. He let out a long, slow breath, flopping back onto his bed, staring up at the ceiling. Well, at least that is over, he muttered to himself, though somehow he had a sinking feeling this was not the last time he was going to have to explain human biology to a bunch of confused aliens. Jake lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process the absolute insanity of the last few days. He had come to this station expecting maybe a few odd looks, maybe some awkward introductions, but instead he had somehow become the most talked about resident on the entire deck, and all because no one in the galaxy seemed to understand basic human anatomy. He sighed loudly, running a hand through his hair. Well, at least the doc cleared me, so maybe now everyone will finally move on and stop treating me like a ticking time bomb. A soft chime from his communicator made him groan. He sat up, reaching for the device, already expecting some new ridiculous development, but instead it was just a system notification informing him that his restriction had officially been lifted. He was no longer under observation, and his name had been cleared from any station security watch lists. About downtime, he muttered, tossing the communicator back onto the nightstand. With a sigh, he stood up, stretched, and made his way to the small kitchenette in the corner of his room, pulling out a snack from the cooling unit. As he took a bite, he heard a soft tapping sound at his door. He froze mid-chew, staring at the door for a long moment, debating whether to just pretend he wasn't there, but the tapping came again, this time a little more insistent. Letting out a dramatic sigh, he stomped over and yanked the door open, ready to tell whoever it was that he was officially done talking about his anatomy. But instead, he found himself staring at Gorvax, the massive reptilian alien, shifting awkwardly on his feet, his 4 clawed hands held in front of him in what Jake had come to recognize as a sign of hesitation. Gorvax, Jake said, slowly crossing his arms. Look, if this is about the whole biological anomaly thing, I'm officially cleared, so unless you are here to apologize. Gorvax let out a deep rumbling sigh. Actually, I am. Jake blinked, not expecting that. Gorvax shifted again, looking uncomfortable. I may have let my assumptions get the better of me, and for that I apologize. You are not a danger, and I should not have treated you like one. Jake stared at him for a moment before rubbing the back of his neck. Well, Dan did not expect that, but thanks, I guess. Gorvax gave a small nod, then hesitated again before speaking. I also wanted to warn you, there is a new problem. Jake groaned. Of course, there is. What now? Gorvax exhaled through his nostrils. Some of the more paranoid residents, they are not satisfied with the scientist's conclusion. They think the results were faked. They believe you are part of some kind of cover-up. Jake stared at him. Are you freaking kidding me? What do they think? I am some secret biological weapon? Gorvax looked to the side awkwardly. Some of them, yes. Jake dragged both hands down his face. Unbelievable. First, I am a parasite host. Now, I am a government conspiracy. What's next? They think I can shapeshift. Gorvax did not answer immediately, which only made Jake groan louder. Oh, come on. I just thought you should know, Gorvax said before taking a step back. I do not think they will try anything serious, but you should be careful. They are afraid, and frightened people sometimes do stupid things. Jake sighed, rubbing his temples. Yeah, thanks for the heads up. Gorvax hesitated once more, then finally turned and walked away, leaving Jake standing in his doorway, feeling an overwhelming sense of frustration and exhaustion. He glanced down the hallway, seeing a few other tenants quickly looking away, as if they had been watching him. Great, now he was public enemy number 1. just because some people refuse to accept reality. Shaking his head, he stepped back inside, shutting the door behind him. Looks like this is not over after all, he muttered under his breath, taking another bite of his snack as he tried to decide how exactly he was going to deal with this latest mess.